More than 500,000 junkies walk our streets. It costs the average addict $12,000 a year to pierce his veins and pour the poison in. And to get that $12,000, an addict without other means has to steal $25,000 worth of merchandise. 60 Minutes went to Turkey, where most American heroin originates as poppies, to France, where most American heroin is manufactured, and to the streets of New York, where most American heroin is consumed, to follow the poison from the poppy fields all the way to the user's veins. We begin in Turkey. Avion Karahisar. That is the name of this town. Avion Karahisar. It means Black Castle of Opium. For 2,000 years and more, since before the Romans came, this has been Turkey's opium capital. The people here are proud of their opium. Best in the world, they boast, for the climate is ideal for these white and purple poppies here on the Anatolian plateau. Until today, this poppy was the principal source of income in Avion, legal and illegal. From a poppy field this size, the farmer who would sell his raw opium illegally would receive $215. That opium, converted into heroin, would bring the smuggler $15,000 on its entry into New York. And on the streets of New York, the addicts who would buy the cut, adulterated heroin that began its life as poppies here in just this acre, those addicts would pay a total of $500,000. The farmers in these lovely fields are bitter now. Bitter toward the United States and toward their own government in Ankara, because the two countries have collaborated to ban forever the growing of the poppy. Flowers of evil, they are called in the United States, which has agreed to pay the Turks $35 million to dictate the ban and to help find other crops or industry to replace the income from the poppy. No longer will the women of Avion go out into their fields to score the poppy pods, so the white opium gum can bleed to be collected 24 hours later. No longer will the Turkish farmer be able to point with pride to opium, which has the highest morphine content in the world. It is only in the last few years the farmer has learned of the damage his poppies have been wreaking in the West. The stories of addiction, of misery and death from the product of his pods have begun to filter through to him. They bewilder him, those stories, for he and his family seldom chew the opium or smoke it. They call it poison, and they cannot understand why the addict in the West would open his veins to heroin. Opium to the Turkish farmer has been a cash crop, his most lucrative one. He sold most of it legally to the government for a fair price, and the rest of it illegally to the smugglers for much more. And his wife has used the seeds to make oil for cooking, the leaves for salads, and the remains as fodder for his animals and fuel for his fire. So he resents the government inspectors who come now to measure the last crop he can ever grow, pod by pod, to estimate what the yield will be and so make sure that all of it will go to the government for purchase, that none can be skimmed off to sell to smugglers. These blocks of pure opium gum are a money-making staple in Turkey's poor economy, shipped to pharmaceutical houses round the world. Some is being held off the market so that in years to come, it can continue as a source of foreign currency. The farmer, too, holds his illegal opium gum off the market. He knows it can keep indefinitely and that it's as good as gold. Mattress money, dowry money, a bank account for his old age. He showed us where he hides it. The smugglers will pay him 3 times as much for his opium right now illegally as the government will give him, and he knows the price can only go up. 10 pounds of opium gum can be converted into 1 pound of morphine base, first step on its way to heroin. The morphine base is smaller, thus easier to hide than opium gum. Usually processed in lonely huts at the edge of the village. It's a simple process. All that's needed is running water, a few pots and pans, some slaked lime, and a fire. The product, the morphine base, comes out looking very much like powdered coffee. In Avion, the farmer makes his contact with the man called the Black Sheep, the smuggler. It is not difficult. Everyone knows when he arrives in town. But there aren't enough narcotics agents around to stop the connection. We talked to a young Turkish smuggler, now retired, he says, who told us just how easy it is.
I went down to Avion. There I found 3 villagers. I told them that I wanted to buy base morphine. I told them that I wanted 30 kilograms. And I agreed to pay them $300 per kilogram. I took the stuff into my car. It had a false compartment underneath. And I drove to Istanbul. There I waited for a couple of days for my exit visa. Then I took the morphine base by myself to Marseille. I had the telephone number of my contact. I called him, and he agreed to pay me $750 a kilogram. So during this first trip, I made a profit of 15,000 American dollars. But the thing is, I was only a small smuggler. There are big businessmen doing this for just big profits.
If Byzantine has come to mean conspiratorial and devious, the ancient Byzantine capital Constantinople, now Istanbul, would seem the most hospitable of capitals for the dealings of the merchants, legal and illegal, who operate from here. Anything and anyone, they say, can be bought here. Istanbul is a commercial bridge between the East and West. Even after Turkey's poppies wither and die, Istanbul will remain a transit point for smugglers bringing narcotics from Afghanistan and Pakistan, from the Far East. The big-time smugglers manipulate from behind the scenes. Legitimate businessmen, even parliamentary leaders, whose respectability goes unquestioned. Their couriers and agents are out front. The Turkish police, whose salary runs to about $75 a month, can be tempted by corrupt money dangled before them, if only they'll perform lackadaisically in their pursuit of smugglers. The police are novices at the narcotics game. Their bureau is only 3 years old. They took us along in a raid that resulted from a telephone tip. They knew just where to go and how deep to dig. The unlucky culprit in this case, a small-time dealer who had previously served a total of 15 years on drug charges. The fact is that few drug arrests of consequence are made in Istanbul, and only insignificant amounts of morphine base or hashish are confiscated. The punishment in Turkey for narcotics violation is tough. One would think it would deter the smuggler. 10 years for pushing, life in prison for manufacture, import, or export of the hard stuff, and death an option in extreme cases. But most offenders serve a short time and by hook or crook or bribery find themselves outside in a few years. A frustration to the Americans who are on the scene for the U.S. Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. If they are polite about it in public, in private they fume over the corruption and the inefficiency of Turkey's narcotics police. The American who is chief of the BNDD from North Africa to India spends most of his time in Turkey. Frank Briggs.
What's the toughest part of your job here?
I don't know. I wish you hadn't asked me that.
Why?
You know, various reasons. We're operating in a foreign country. We don't have the jurisdiction and authority as we do at home. That's probably the largest problem we have to overcome.
In other words, you could move faster and conceivably better.
Not conceivably better, but faster, because we don't, at home, we're within our own operation. Here, we're working within the confines of somebody else's operation.
Can you give me an example of some operation in which you have cooperated with the Turks?
I think the most recent example, it was culminated about 2 weeks ago in Istanbul, working jointly with the Turkish National Police and their informant, who we also talked to, gathered the intelligence where the truck was coming from, where it was going to, and the truck was intercepted and the seizure of morphine base was made. You can do so much, and then there are very ingenious traps, we call them, that are built into the vehicle, and gas tanks, in other portions of the vehicle body that are not easily detectable. And unless there is hard information that a truck or a vehicle is carrying contraband, it'd be very difficult to dismantle each and every vehicle that crossed international borders throughout the world. These ships were used quite extensively for some time, and then enforcement activities or customs inspections at various countries increased on the ships. The method of operation of these smugglers changed to take into consideration the increased inspection, say for instance in Marseille.
If the traffic in contraband has diminished on the ships that leave Istanbul for Marseille, the traffic in contraband that goes overland through Europe to Munich is on the rise. Each morning, each evening, trucks like these line up here by the hundreds, waiting for the ferry that goes west from this Asian side of the Bosphorus into Europe. It is in trucks like these that the opium, now converted to morphine base, is hidden. In trucks like these, the contraband begins its clandestine journey toward Western Europe. They are TIR trucks. It means Transport International Routier. Trucks licensed to cross international boundaries uninspected once they've been sealed by Turkish customs. More than half the illicit traffic leaves Turkey in these trucks. Morphine base can either be concealed inside with a cargo by removing the hinges on the sides or back after the TIR sealing has taken place. Or the plastic bags can be secreted in dummy gas tanks, in spare tires, or in special compartments camouflaged on the underbody. The lure of $10,000 for one successful trip ensures there is no shortage of drivers. Here at the Turkish-Bulgarian border, 100 trucks and thousands of cars pass this frontier each day. It's impossible to check them all. Our smuggler from Avion, who has made the trip 6 times, says the border check is mostly cursory and sometimes paid for in advance.
When a truck has a TIR plate, it doesn't have any difficulty passing through the frontiers. You know, the big smugglers, they have relatives, friends, contacts in customs, police, security men. So they tip off. And when the specific truck comes to the frontier, the security man just signs the document and lets the truck through.
From here on, the trip is all downhill, for no one looks inside the TIR truck after this. The most popular destination is Munich, which has recently become the major transit point before the morphine base goes southwest to Marseille. Another road the private cars take goes through Yugoslavia and Italy and down to Marseille. And there is still some traffic that goes by ship from Istanbul to Marseille. In Marseille, the morphine base is manufactured into heroin. From here, the heroin goes to the United States.